As you do this, corporate training, you do these speaking engagements. What are the biggest challenges you're seeing, you know, seeing people face nowadays? Maybe with their own self-talk, their own limitations.
Yeah, I think that what you've hit upon there, right? So self-talk is a big deal, and from my coaching experience and coaching others, it's pretty consistent. And I'd take the pretty out and just say it's consistent that people speak negatively to themselves, and I know it's been a challenge for me, and I used it personally. I thought it was helping me. Like I'm really hard on myself, and that drives me forward. And when I had a coach ask me, do you think it helps you? And I was like, well, yeah, I think it does help me. And he's like, okay, well, do you speak that way to others that you have high expectations of, like your team or your kids? And I was like, well, no. And he asked, well, why not? And I was like, well, because it'd be crushing. It wouldn't inspire them to do more. It would likely encourage them to do less. He's like, well, then why are you speaking that way to yourself? And how could you speak to yourself, right? What would be motivating? What if you think about your best coaches or your best, athletic coaches? What inspired you? I'm like, well, when a coach that I really respected told me like, good job, or you're doing great, or here's what you need to do next, man, I would die to accomplish that. He's like, well, maybe try that, right? So self-talk is a definitely a big deal. And I would say, um, accomplishing small things along the way gives you confidence on the journey toward a bigger goal, right? So I've termed this like this idea, and it's not a novel idea, but this idea that small wins big, right? So small steps, you have a big goal, something bold, something that you've put out there, and the way to get that is just one little micro step at a time. And what happens as you move toward that goal is you become a different human. You become a different person through the confidence that comes from the experiences, right? So, like for my Boston Marathon story, as you know, right, so there's a qualifying standard based on your sex, your gender, and your age, right? So for me, I had to run, I believe it was a 3 hour and 20, sorry, it was 3 hour and 30-minute marathon, and I ran 3:26:25. So I beat the qualifying standard by 3 minutes 35 seconds. And the way Boston works, as you know, and your listeners may not know, is they only have so many spots on the road, right? So they have about 38,000 or so slots that they can medically take care of people, and that there's enough room to get fire trucks around and stuff like that. And so if they have more qualified runners than 38,000, well, then they have to start culling that group back. So you've qualified, but they tell you, oh, based on all these people that qualified, you needed to beat your time by, say, a minute or 30 seconds or whatever. Every year it's a little different. Some years, if you qualify, you're in. In fact, in the old days, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 10, if you qualified, you were in, right? You were going to get invited to race. 100%. In fact, they gave you an extra minute. So if your qualifying time was, say, 3 hours 30, you were given 3 hours 30 and 59 seconds. And if you were within that extra 59 seconds, you were still guaranteed to run it. Well, popularity of running and different things. Now a lot more than 38,000 qualify. So they set this number after all the qualifying is done and say you had to beat your time by X. You don't know until it's over. All right. And the year that I qualified and beat my time by 3:35, in the history of the race, 123 years of the race, you never needed to beat your qualifying standard by that much time in order to be invited to run the following April, right, in Boston, except the year that I ran it, right? So that year you had to beat your time by 4 minutes, 52 seconds. So I was 77 seconds short of what I needed in order to be invited to come run in Boston in April. I was a qualified runner, but not an invited runner to come run the race. 77 seconds short. And I had a lot of friends say, oh man, you must be devastated. That's such a robbery. That's unfair. You qualified. You should be in. And I remember being moderately, I'm like disappointed, like, but like, Mom, I'm just going to train and run faster because I had already set like a 7-minute PR as a guy that hadn't, that was older than I'd ever been when I ran that race, right? As we always are. And, and I had never run a marathon as fast as I ran that marathon. And I beat my prior PR, which I had set like in 2012, like 6 years prior, by 7 minutes. And so I was like, I know what I'm capable of now. I know I can keep pushing. I'm just going to qualify again. I'm going to run faster. And so 8 months later, I ran in Fort Worth, Texas, and I ran 4 minutes faster again. Right. So, and Boston took out, they said, man, we were almost, that's like bad that we had so many disappointed qualified runners. We had to tell so many runners that they were not invited to come up here. We're going to set the standard higher so that we don't have to do that again. So they took 5 minutes away from everybody. So now 8 months later, I had to run not 3:30, I had to run 3:25, right? So I had to go even faster. And I ran a 3:22:04. So once again, I beat my prior PR by minutes, which in marathon running, when that's a lot. It's not, if you only beat it by a minute, you're doing pretty good. I was beating it by multiple minutes, my PR. And so I qualified again. And I got the card that time where they said, congratulations, you needed to beat it by, I can't remember. I beat it by like 2:56, and I needed to beat it by like, I don't know, 1:30 or something like that. And so I had more than exceeded the time needed. I was good to go, got the card, and it said, congratulations, you're welcome to, can't wait to see you in Boston, April of 2020, right? April of 2020, as we all know, a lot was going on back then. For the first time in 124 years of the race, there was no Boston Marathon in April of 2020, courtesy of COVID. And I was training to run that April race, and I was 15 or 16 weeks into a 20-week program, and I was ready to go qualify again at Boston. I was going to qualify for Boston at Boston, and I was just like a machine. Like I just going to keep going, like no big deal. COVID breaks out. People are like, oh, and then the first marathon gets canceled, the second marathon. And there's this rumor, oh, Boston might get canceled. What do you think? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I can't do anything about it. Well, what am I supposed to think? I'm just training, and there'll be another race. I'll run another one. And then they did cancel Boston 5 weeks or 4 weeks before the race date. So I was trained. I was ready to go into a taper. I was done. I mean, I was fit as a fiddle and ready to rip it. And there wasn't a race. It didn't happen. So, but again, I have friends like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. It's so unfair. You should have been there last year and you got robbed. And now this year there's no race. And isn't it awful? And I was like, no, like I'm a different runner now. I'm a different human. It doesn't matter to me that the life circumstances threw me this curveball that I don't get. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm just going to keep running. So what it did was it taught me, it showed me through all those incremental little changes, that small wins big mentality I'd made a massive shift with tiny little micro steps along the way. And it took me to a whole nother place. I was a different human. And so that to me is the lesson that comes out of that. Right now, once, for about a year, I think there were no marathons. There were no public, you couldn't run a marathon, right? Because COVID was going on and these cities couldn't figure out how to do races. And so there were none. And in that time, my goals, my purpose, my mission changed again, where I was like, okay, training this hard for a marathon, there's got to be a push and a pull, right? So I was sacrificing a massive amount of time with my family, with my wife. Really, my kids were grown at this point, and it was really with my wife. And so, life revolved around me training and eating right and all these things that I loved. I was committed to it. And yet it was taking away from, her and my time together. And I was so focused on the importance of like, well, can't do a social thing tonight because I have a training in the morning at 5:30 in the morning, or I was training super early. So even earlier than that, 4 a.m. And it was like putting too much pressure on our marriage, where it's like, okay, so like, all right, mission accomplished. I accomplished the goal. I qualified for Boston twice. I had the card invited to come run the race. Um, I'm good. Like, next thing, like I'm going to go back to focusing on, I want to be fit, healthy, and keep running. So I ran a trail ultra and a couple other, like I did a 24-hour race. Just how far can you go in 24 hours? I've done some multi-day things, but the focus around training for Boston was it was taking a toll on my marriage to where I was like, it's time to put that goal's been accomplished. It's time to now let's refocus on what's really important, which is my family, my wife, my relationship with her. And so I dialed that back and, kept on rolling. But it was, again, became more about like me taking time to understand values, mission, and purpose, and having that built in now, that engine built in of like, okay, does this align with me, my values, my purpose, and why I'm here? And if it doesn't, well, it's time to stop, right? Let's not just feed the ego.